political influences of our world is definitely important, but understanding ourselves is perhaps just as crucial. Our next speaker, Anthony Taylor, is using the TEDx stage to express his own story. So let's welcome Anthony.
I was just 9 years old when my doctor told me that my life could end. Just 24 hours earlier, she was a complete stranger. A wave of numbness and disbelief washed over me. I had felt as if something was wrong for a while, but it was not until she spoke that I thought I understood the gravity of the situation. My memory was scattered as I had my first seizure. And I couldn't even come to understand the meaning of her words or the impact that they would have on me in the coming days, months, or years. As I sat at my dining room table, having just returned home from the hospital at 2 a.m., I realized that everything changed. And as my family surrounded me with faces of worry and concern, I could not help but feel completely disconnected from their reality and everything that had just happened. But it was not as if my innocence was completely stripped away. I never really had a concept of death. And while death seemed far more real and immediate, where it used to seem distant and abstract, I was still unable to treat it as such. Despite any so-called childhood wisdom that I thought I'd gleaned from watching the tragic death of Mufasa in The Lion King, a 10 or even 12-year-old version of myself was unable to approach death with the necessary urgency. Statistics were the closest thing I had to gaining an understanding of my condition. And as irrational as it was, I thought that I would be one of the 1 in 1,000 people to suddenly and unexpectedly die from epilepsy every year. I thought that I would die when I didn't even have a concept of death. As horrible as it sounds, death became a comfort for me. It was the ultimate reassurance that no matter what happened to me or what I did, none of it would matter, because eventually I would die. And whether that happened in 5 years, 10 years, or 50 years made no difference to me. All of this was a way to gain control in a situation where control seemed completely alien. It was as if by resigning myself to fate, I could gain a fleeting sense of agency. It was as if by attempting to come to terms with my condition and the effects that it had on me, I could gain an appearance of control over my life. However, now I realized that this was not genuine acceptance. I was not interested in coming to terms with my situation or how it had affected me. Rather, the opposite. I wanted to avoid myself, and I wanted to avoid everything that had just happened to me. My newfound sense of control required me to relinquish almost any sense of urgency that I had in my life. And having and partially contributing to my own inability to make decisions, I felt a significant loss of personhood. I felt reduced to a statistic, which was the very thing I feared that others would do to me. My fears became more intense, as did my inability to make decisions. And I began to approach simple, everyday tasks with immense caution. Every time I would step under the spray of a shower or in the bathtub, the voices of worst-case scenarios would surface. What if I were to have a seizure and drown? What if I were to collapse on the stairs all alone? What if others were to see? As those around me eagerly acquired their driver's licenses, I hesitated, absolutely terrified by the idea of losing control behind the wheel of a car. And what made it worse was that I was absolutely terrified of being perceived as weak or incapable, so I felt that I couldn't or shouldn't speak out about what was happening. I lost interest in almost everything as a consequence. Not only did I continue to put off getting my driver's license, but I put off going new places, meeting new people, and doing new things. What made all of this worse was that I became anxious about my own anxiety, which only fueled my seizures and made my anxiety worse. I remember sitting at my computer screen for my freshman year virtual photography class. All the assignments were take-home given the pandemic, so I could spend 2-3 hours on them easy. It was probably the first thing I was able to get truly lost in. And while I don't think I fully developed an appreciation for photography until long after, when I got my camera, when I found a way to express myself, and when around 2 or 3 years ago during this time, I submitted my first set of photos to the Scholastic Art Awards. This was the first thing that I had won and could truly say I felt proud about. I also remember during that time discussing emergency care for seizures in a health class. I felt conflicted. On the one hand, I wanted to provide my insight, my experience, and make everything feel a little bit more real. But on the other hand, I was absolutely terrified of how my classmates would see me. What if they were to treat me with pity? What if they were to treat me differently? So I made the choice of silence. And as the class came to a close, I could not help but feel as if I had missed an opportunity, as if I had something to say but did not. I now realize that I had sacrificed my own ability to educate and advocate in exchange for comfort. And as I look back on those moments, I realized that my silence and my avoidance of my own problems only served to deepen the alienation that I felt and reinforce many barriers that people with epilepsy face daily. I wanted to speak out, to share my story, but I had no idea how to do that when I could barely share or accept myself. I wish I could say there was some kind of turning point, or a moment when everything changed and I was able to suddenly reclaim my ability to make decisions and feel my fear completely slip away. However, that is not the case. Everything that happened was accumulation of almost all of my lived experiences and my efforts to avoid and accept myself. I remember one night, before a scheduled sleep study, I had taken a walk to try and stay awake. The coolness and the stillness of the air were comforting, and as I continued to walk through the vacant streets, and as I continued to wake and move through the vacant streets, I felt my footsteps provide a rhythm for my thinking and anchor me in the present. It was probably one of the first times where I felt I was truly able to relax, and it seemed like in a moment, years of worry and uncertainty suddenly slipped away as I was able to develop an appreciation for the present moment. These two moments provided me the ability to express myself, to find meaning and beauty in the present, and to stop trying to fill every moment in my life with constant distractions and ways to avoid myself. Instead, I started to sit with myself and find out what I actually like. During this time, my interest in photography deepened, and I began to read about other people's perspectives and experiences, which greatly helped me to formulate my own. Also during this time, I remember being incredibly inspired by all the famous people and historical figures who had had epilepsy and still achieved so much. I realize now that courage takes time, and I may never fully come to accept myself, but at the very least, I can make active efforts to overcome my fears, no matter how uncomfortable they are. And I can aspire to make myself proud and reclaim my ability to make decisions. Truthfully, there are still many times where I feel overly reluctant, cautious, or hesitant to take on new tasks. But I have learned to try and to enjoy trying. So I will now say what it has taken me my whole life to say. I am a person with epilepsy, and I cannot speak for forever, but currently I am living and not just surviving. Thank you.